Well, good day. I'm Professor Dion Foster from the Faculty of Theology, and it's my joy to share with you a little bit today around why one should study theology and what you can do with a degree in theology. So we're going to cover a couple of points in the next 10 minutes or so, and I hope that you'll find this meaningful and interesting. Now, the very first question that we want to answer is the question, what is theology? What is it that you're actually going to study when you do theology? So the word theology is made up of two words. Both of them are Greek words. The first word is theos and the second word is logos. And the word theos is the Greek word for God. And the word logos is the Greek word for knowledge or study. So traditionally throughout the ages, people have always thought of theology as a sort of way of thinking about God, who God is, what persons believe in God, and what these beliefs might mean for us in everyday life. Now, certainly for Christians and for those who adhere to other faiths like Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, what we find is that people are often focused on religious beliefs and practices. And of course, the sources for those beliefs are things like sacred texts. So in Christianity, for example, people will study the Hebrew scriptures, what sometimes is called the Old Testament, and also the New Testament. And certainly for those of you who do our Bachelor of Divinity degree, you'll also have the option to study those in their source languages, in Hebrew and in Greek. And I can tell you that certainly is something very exciting. But together with that, we're also interested not only in religious beliefs and practices. So, for example, by religious beliefs, we might mean things like believing in God. So why do people believe in God? What does it mean to believe in God? What do we believe about the world? Is the world created good? What do we believe about persons, for example? One of the beliefs in Christianity is that all human beings are created in the image of God. Now, if that's a belief, how should we live in society so that belief is brought to bear? And that's what we call the discipline of ethics. It's one of the disciplines we study in theology, alongside some of those that I've mentioned already, like Old Testament studies, New Testament studies, systematic theology, which is the sort of philosophy of our beliefs, and then, of course, also church history, or the history of Christianity. But we don't only study religious beliefs. In theology, we also study something called non-religious beliefs. Now, what is a non-religious belief? Well, let me show you an example of a book that we recently wrote and edited. The book is called African Public Theology. And in particular, what we were interested in studying in this book is to see the ways in which beliefs that people hold that are not necessarily religious beliefs. So, for example, beliefs about how the world should work, how things like money systems work. I mean, who determines the value of currencies? Well, you might be surprised to learn that a currency's value is a form of belief. I believe it's worth 20 Rand and you believe it's worth 20 Rand. And together we believe if I give you this note that says 20, that it'll be worth what it is. So we look at what we call secular beliefs as well, and how these shape our societies. And very often these secular beliefs determine how we live. For example, how we think about the roles and responsibilities of women and girls, or the roles and responsibilities of men and boys in society. I'll show you another book. This was a book we wrote a couple of years ago. The title kind of gives it away. The book is entitled, What is a Good Life? An Introduction to Christian Ethics in 21st Century Africa. And here we were particularly wanting to ask questions around what does it mean to engage religious beliefs and secular beliefs with one another. So I hope that you can see that to study theology will give you a wonderful grounding in being able to understand the world in which you live and why we do so many of the things that we do. Now, let's move on to the next question. The second question that we want to ask is, why would you study theology? Now, I've got a couple of points on the screen there that we'll just talk to. The first one is that people often study theology because they're wanting to gather knowledge, values, and skills for a particular kind of life. Now, think about it. We often speak of this as the head, the heart, and the hands, the knowledge, the values or spirituality or faith and the skills in order to live a particular kind of life. Now, many of the people who study theology are wanting to lay a good foundation for a life that matters. They want to live a kind of life that can be called a good life. And if we think about the content of that word good, what would you describe a good life as? Now, some people might say, well, a good life is to own a nice car and a big house and lots of money in the bank. I don't know about you, but I know a few people who have all of those things and their lives seem not to be good. So part of what we do, part of why we study theology, is so that we can learn the knowledge, the values and the skills for a life that matters. The second thing that we recognize, and this is particularly true for us who live in Africa, but from Africa into the world, is that we want to learn more about the matters of religion. We're wanting to understand much more, not only what people believe, but why they hold their beliefs, why they believe them to be true, and also very often the consequences of their beliefs. But I think you'll also agree with me that it's not only religious matters that matter, it's also that there are matters of religion that are impacting on the world. Think, for example, about the ways in which some religious conflicts on our continent here in Africa between Christians and persons, for example, of Islamic faith in places like Nigeria and elsewhere in the world have caused great conflict, great suffering and great harm. Think, for example, about how some religious communities have oppressed women and girls or disregarded persons who might not be in the norm in society. So part of what we're wanting to do in the study of theology is to think about what kind of beliefs are good and true and right. What kind of beliefs fit into the traditions that we hold? For example, often in church history or Christian history, we're wanting to understand what have people believed about things throughout history. The second to last point that I want to mention is that very often we encourage people who study theology to learn the skills of critical thinking. Now, what that means is that I do want to warn you as a theologian, the one thing that you learn to do is you learn to read. A lot of what we do is based on texts. You learn to think critically about what you read and observe in the world. And you also learn the kind of skills that are necessary very often for a life of transformation and service. And we pride ourselves at the Faculty of Theology at Stellenbosch University in being an African, contextually rooted Faculty of Theology in the top 100 in the world, certainly a very excellent Faculty of Theology, but rooted in our context. And so very often people come to study theology, as the last point says there, because they're wanting to prepare themselves for a life of service. Now, this segues into the very last section of our short presentation today, which is the question, what can you do with a degree in theology? Now, I often have parents asking me this, they say, what can my child do if she or he has studied a degree in theology in your faculty? And you'll see on the screen there that there are a number of things. So first of all, we find that many of the people who come to study with us are coming because they are wanting to enter ministry and service. So the Faculty of Theology has a number of church partners, the Dutch Reformed Church, the Uniting Reformed Church, the Anglican Church, the Lutherans, the Volkskerk, and then a host of about 16 other churches with whom we have memoranda of understanding. And very often these persons who are wanting to enter some form of pastoral ministry, perhaps to be a pastor or a priest or a dominee, a minister, come and study theology with us so that they can be prepared for a life of service and transformation. The other interesting thing that we've realized over the last 10 years or so is that very often people come and they study theology because they want a good foundation for a career that they're going to take perhaps in another part of life. So we've often had students who come to study an undergraduate degree, either a Bachelor of Theology or a Bachelor of Divinity degree, and then go on to do things such as law. And perhaps they're thinking about things like freedom of religion or the ways in which religious beliefs might either further and protect human rights and human dignity, or the ways in which they might curtail them and present some problems. A lot of our students go on and they don't go into formal ministry like pastoral ministry, like a pastor or a priest, but they go into some other form of service. So we, as you would know already from the other video, have a specialization in youth work. We do specializations in counseling. So very often people go into one of these kinds of specializations. They work for an organization that tries to support people in society. We have a lot of our students that after they have done their Bachelor of Theology degree go on to do a postgraduate qualification, either an honors or a certificate, postgraduate certificate in education, and they end up becoming teachers. Recently, the last couple of years, what we've also seen is that many of our students go on, after they've studied theology, into careers such as journalism. Because as I say, one of the things that you learn when you do theology is you learn to read carefully, to think critically, and to write and to speak with a measure of confidence and clarity. And so many of our students have gone on to those careers. Of course, people who studied theology have gone into many other forms of service. We know certainly that one of the former rectors of our university, Professor Russell Botman, was a theologian. Our current vice rector for transformation, personnel and social impact, Professor Nico Koopman, was formerly the Dean of Theology. So we often find that people who study theology are well prepared for a life of service. So let me quickly conclude with a couple of points. Why study theology at Stellenbosch University in particular? Now, there are 3 points that I want to share with you. The first one is that Stellenbosch University is a vibrant, transformative, inclusive African community of learning and formation. And this, I think, is a very important thing to know. We have a wonderful community on one of the most beautiful campuses here at the University of Stellenbosch. And from first year all the way through to fourth year, fifth year, even PhD, our students remain active and involved in the life of the faculty. The second thing is, as I mentioned, that we are a world-class institution. We are one of the top 100 faculties of theology in the world and the number one faculty of theology in Africa. And we're very grateful to be able to serve the needs of those who are wanting to gain critical, excellent, rigorous skills for theology and for life. Finally, I think that what you'll find is by studying theology at the University of Stellenbosch, you're going to get some of the best professors and lecturers in the world who are going to share with you knowledge, values, skill, and formation for a lifetime of meaningful service and work. So thanks for watching this video, and we hope that you'll be in touch with us, and we hope to see you in class in the near future.